Check, 1, 2. All right, so I think we're about ready to start. Thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate everyone's patience with the RSVP process, but I think we managed to get folks in. We got a nice packed house. And also just a big thank you to Amanda Hickman for helping us kind of scramble last minute to find a new home for the StoryCode forums. So for March and April we will be here, and then most likely in the summers we're going for May, June, July, and August we'll be at NYU ITP, and we'll give you some more info as to locations. First off, I just wanted to say that I'm flying solo. My partner in crime Ina, is actually out of the country today, so you're just going to be stuck with me today. And I just wanted to give Amanda a quick moment to talk to you guys about the School of Journalism.
I just want to say thanks and welcome. I'm an adjunct. I teach interactive reporting and data visualization, and if you have questions about the school, I'm happy to answer them. Jeremy Kaplan, are you the director of an entrepreneurial program? Is the director of our entrepreneurial program. He's also a great person to talk to if you're curious about the school. And we have a firm fire code rule about sitting on the radiators. So if there's a seat next to you, if you see somebody come in and sort of huddle, encourage them with more than just sort of graciousness to actually take a seat, because otherwise, because I promised Officer Germain that there would not be standing people. That's why. Cool.
Well, thanks again, Amanda, for helping us and for working out hosting the forum. We really appreciate it. So we're really excited. Normally, or in the past, most of our programming has been fiction focused, and we wanted to kind of broaden our horizons and really bring a nonfiction focus to this evening's forum. And that's what kind of brings me to our guest, Adnaan. I had the pleasure of meeting Adnaan a couple, maybe 6 months ago. We participated in the first story hackathon, the POV hackathon, which was an amazing experience. I highly recommend it for everyone in this room to do a hackathon at some point in your life. And the POV ones are awesome. So we asked Adnaan to come in and talk about nonfiction documentaries on the web, talk about the story hackathon, and we're really excited to welcome him. So welcome, Adnaan.
Well, thanks, Mike. So the first thing I want to tell you is just sort of an overview of where we're going to go today. I know that usually you're looking at fiction projects or ARGs or transmedia, and this time we're going to be digging into nonfiction, some of the issues that people are dealing with in this sort of world right now, and maybe this is a good time to ask how many people here are consider themselves in the nonfiction documentary world. Okay, wow, that's most people. How about fiction? Okay, how many of you are actually makers? Okay, good. Anybody here from advertising? Okay, I just wanted to check because I love advertising. So, okay, so I do. I'm going to talk about it. So, the first thing I want to talk about while I'm juggling these three screens is so POV, which is where I work. So I'm the head of digital at POV. I also run a software company, so I sort of juggle those two things. My background is in technology and also journalism, so I'm coming to this from those two separate fields. But the first thing to tell you is, if you know POV, POV is this, many Oscar and many Emmy-winning show. Has won the best Emmy documentary for the last 2 years. You've probably seen many films. I could name them forever. Food Inc. is probably a big one that you might have seen more recently. That was a big one for POV. And we're actually about to announce our season tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. But what I want to tell you about POV is actually, it's not a TV show. So just to get you in the framework of what we're doing, and if you bear with me, POV is a transmedia viral buzz engagement community platform. Nobody's going to call me on that? So, I mean, I could get away with saying this to a lesser group, but the idea is that POV for a very long time has been thinking about not this word transmedia, but thinking about engagement. And POV called it in its earliest days high impact television, which is thinking of film not as a linear thing, but to think of it as something that has a community component to it, where you could have action being taken on the issues that are being discussed. So this goes back, a really long time, and so it's not actually new for POV, who's been doing things like online chats since the mid-90s, and did something called Talkback for a while, if you know this show, where people filmed themselves on their VHS recorders and sent them in, and POV actually showed those VHS tapes on television, which sounds, like anybody should do that today, but 25 years ago that was totally novel, obviously. So that's where we're coming from with POV. So transitioning to transmedia, and I was just thinking about what I think of transmedia, because the word doesn't usually apply in nonfiction, and this is actually what I think of when I think of transmedia. And I'll explain this because it's actually what I think of transmedia. So transmedia is about a fictional story, a fictional thing, perhaps a unicorn, and how this fictional idea then encroaches in fun ways in the nonfiction world. So I know people have different definitions of what transmedia is, but I think of it as this, fiction encroaching in nonfiction. So when you think of a documentary, it's not fiction. Documentary is already, I'm going to just skip ahead a little bit here. So a documentary is nonfiction, and you're turning nonfiction into a narrative. So when you think of it, it's actually the reverse direction. You're going from nonfiction into something that's sort of like a fictional construct. And then it's kind of weird if you then take that fictional construct and then push it back into the nonfiction world, because it was already nonfiction. So the kinds of things that you talk about in transmedia, it's really difficult to apply them directly to a nonfiction documentary work. If you're thinking about a website or something that becomes real, an ARG or something, it's kind of weird, because why would you have an ARG for something that is already real? So I think about those sorts of things. But then when you think about things like what you do all day long on social media, when you think about things like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, a lot of the stuff that's there is actually nonfiction content. And so I think about this in a bigger way like this. I think about nonfiction being really the stuff of the web. And if nonfiction is powering the web, why shouldn't the web power nonfiction? So that's some of where I'm coming from when I think about how nonfiction works in this transmedia sort of world. Another just reminder is, that's not actually fitting here, I'm sorry about that. But my mom doesn't have any idea what transmedia is. My dad doesn't know what transmedia is. I don't think most people have any idea what that is. What they know is when they have fun doing something, or when they have an experience that's a little bit different, or when they love a character so much they're really excited that they can continue to engage with that character or a story, whether it's Batman or Santa Claus, or the Transformers. It's all the same sort of thing. You like it, you watch the TV show, and you're happy to buy the Happy Meal version of that thing. So that's what people understand. They don't really understand a lot of the language that we talk about. They don't have the clue what an ARG is, but you guys do. So I just remember that when we're making something, and also a realization that a lot of times, again, we discuss these things, but a lot of things we talk about that we're really excited about, they have not popped in the mainstream. They have a very small group of people who know what they are, and the Venn diagram is shared with a lot of the people in this room. So I think about that a lot. So in terms of what the kinds of conversations I have with filmmakers is I say, stop thinking about documentary as documentaries. Start thinking of it in the context of other fields that are really, really robust. And so I named 3 industries. Advertising, which has been doing great stuff for decades, since the 50s, definitely 40s probably if you go back that far. And we learn things from advertising like unique selling proposition, USP, if you heard this word, it actually came out of the advertising industry. Positioning, which there's some overlap obviously with marketing, but you think about product positioning. But it's not just that, it's also what's the nugget, what's essential in this project? How do you bring the truth out of this thing that you're doing? What's the verisimilitude of this thing? And then what do people buy? That's consumer psychology. These are things that advertising has been doing for decades because they've had money, and the market forces have been working on them for many years. So they've figured a lot of this stuff out. And advertising has taken a lot of leadership in transmedia, as many of you know, being in this advertising industry. Another thing to learn from is entrepreneurship, entrepreneurism. So these are things I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Things like the minimum viable product. What's that smallest thing that you can put out there that shows what you are trying to do in the world? And then there's a related concept, validated learning. These are a little bit newer concepts, but entrepreneurship is not a new thing, obviously. But then also from that business world, you learn things about, well, making money. And usually documentaries are not about making money, but to think about how could we make money off of this? That's the commerce side. And productivity. I mean, how do you create an organization out of something that can, have this sustainable business over years? These are things that come out of entrepreneurship. And then from the software industry. So obviously a lot of the things that you've probably worked with and that I'm going to be talking about a lot today revolves around code. So you've got to bring in ideas from the software industry. Things like agile software development. Things like interaction design, which is also called user experience, UX. But then again, there's many more things you can learn from software. Things like the open source community, how that's worked and how that's thrived. And also just testing, the QA process, quality assurance process. So there's a lot of things to learn. So just a couple of quotes. I mean, these are words that if you don't know these words, go look them up, do Google searches. I could talk about them forever, but the easiest thing to do is just find them on Wikipedia. Just to go back to advertising, does anybody know this quote? Just raise your hand if you know it, I'm just curious. Okay, one person, one cool person. This is a quote which dates back something like 50 years. It's from a guy named Howard Gossage, and I can read it for the people who are at the back, I guess. Nobody reads ads. People read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad. This is actually really like a high. This speaks a lot to people being worthy of being advertised to. If you think about how a lot of advertising might be pandering to people, this is actually thinking of this is pretty highbrow. But we can take that for web documentaries or for anything, and tweak that and say, well, nobody watches web documentaries. People watch what interests them, and sometimes it's a web doc. So again, I'm not that I'm jaded, but I think about what are good things we can put out into the world that people might like, as opposed to shoving things on people and then doing all this sort of magic with social media to try to get people to like something. It's weird. So I treat people as I don't know, like humans. So, but actually, another thing just about Howard Gossage for a second. He's really interesting. You should research him if you find that quote interesting. He's known for doing something where this is a kind of a standard. This is one of his first ads. It's a very standard ad. He used to do a lot of these print ads. And this says, "Be the first one in your block to win a kangaroo." This is an ad for Qantas. And it was a very typical ad from Gossage. What he would do is he would pose a question, and then he'd have like lots and lots of copy, and there'd be a coupon you could fill out and send in. And you wouldn't get anything, but it would be just sort of a fun thing. But anyways, look up Gossage. He's a really interesting person if you're interested. Switching over to the software industry, and then we'll move on to some projects. This is Steve Jobs, obviously, a very long time ago. It's not clear exactly when he said it or who he said it to, but Apple employees definitely said that he did say this. And he says, "Real artists ship." And what this means, if you haven't heard this before, actually, who's heard this before? Okay, a lot more people. The idea is that you can come up with this awesome idea, but unless you actually produce it and get it out in the world, it's not going to have a chance to have impact. And that's what he saw when he went to Xerox PARC and essentially stole the idea for the PC. Xerox was never going to turn that into something, and he did. And there are a few other examples, even in his own company, where he wasn't shipping and he was really frustrated. So he started this sort of mantra, and it became an Apple thing. It also means that a product doesn't need to be perfect. It's another part of this, a corollary of what Steve Jobs was saying. And we know, I just remember when the iPhone came out, it didn't have copy and paste, like things like that, and it was good enough. So he's an artist, he shipped. Okay, so we're going to move on to projects. I'm going to show you a few things that came out of our hackathon that Mike mentioned. You can also go and view all of the prototypes. They're all online, so the ones that I'm going to show you, don't worry if you missed them or if you missed the URL. You can always go back and watch them again. And at the same time, this is a call for people who are interested in participating. The hackathon, the call for entry is technically closed, but if you talk to me afterwards, we'll see what we can do. We're looking for filmmakers, we're looking for designers, we're looking for developers, just people who are interested in working on some nonfiction storytelling idea for a weekend. That's essentially what it is, so I can tell you more. And also just a warning, the things that you're going to see here from the hackathon anyways, they're not necessarily in final form. You're going to see things that are prototypes. They may not be totally polished, so you'll see that. They're still pretty slick, but you'll see some rough edges, so just a reminder there. So I want to show you some projects. So I'm trying to find a good framework for this. I'm essentially just finding an excuse to just show you some stuff. So I want to show you, I'm going to frame them around some things that I think are opportunities, some things that are issues that filmmakers and developers are dealing with. And one of the things that I think is really interesting right now is this idea that we're all sensors. There are sensors in the world. We all have our cameras. We're all connected to things, and everybody's tracking what we're doing. We're essentially sensors for corporations. But you could also think of the sensor as somebody who not is passively contributing to some sort of data set, big data set, but is explicitly contributing. So crowdsourcing is a word you've probably heard, where people are explicitly sharing an experience. It might be that something is just on, a camera might be on. There might be a motion detector somewhere that turns the camera on. Or it may be that you're in a shared experience and a lot of people are recording things in different ways and you can collect those experiences. These are the kinds of things that are possible now that we have these always connected devices. And I'm going to show you a project right now, which is, I'm going to show you a trailer from this project. And this project is called Bear 71. And this is arguably the best nonfiction project of 2012. It was made by the National Film Board of Canada, or backed by the National Film Board of Canada. And it's won awards not just for being a documentary, but also just being an awesome website. So I just want to show you a clip from this.
Executive producer of Bear 71. Bear 71 is a rich interactive project, installation, social narrative, and live event story world that at the heart of it all features a 20-minute interactive documentary created by Jeremy Mendez, Leanne Allison, and the NFB Digital Studio. The interactive project is about the intersection of animals, humans, and technology. It features 1 million photos captured with motion detection cameras placed in the habitat of animals in the Bow Valley in Canada, a place that has been studied a lot by Parks Canada because of the proximity and intersections of animals to people and Canmore nearby. Bear 71's story is told to you in the first person in the voice of an omniscient, all-knowing grizzly bear that understands science, technology, human habits, and of course animal behavior. It's a linear story mixed with a non-linear user experience. It forces you to watch certain key scenes in full-screen video. The non-linear user experience features the grid, where you can navigate this rich world of data and explore the caches of content, which features footage captured from the motion-triggered cameras. The grid is a rich digital map that represents the world as humans see it. It also has a secret surveillance mode where you are asked to turn on your webcam and encounter other users. Bear 71 is performed by Mia Kirshner and features a rich soundtrack including Radiohead, Atlas Sound, Laurie Spiegel, and Grouper. The project is launching at Sundance and features installations in Park City and Salt Lake City that enhance the experience with an augmented reality tablet app. As well, there's going to be a live event where audiences will see the project unveiled, meet the creators, and take part in the launch of the social narrative, which features surveillance cameras, animal role-playing, a real bear trap, all this spread throughout Park City. You can follow all of this on our Tumblr blog as well as on #Bear71.
Okay, so you can see that they obviously embrace the transmedia idea around Sundance, but the legacy of that project is not the transmedia. The legacy is essentially it's the website. And if you couldn't tell, this was in the sensors category. The only reason that documentary was possible is because of this idea of sensors. The animals are tracked, and you're able to track that over time and interact with those things, turn those cameras on, go back and forth in this non-linear way. So. Again, I think that's enough to say about Bear 71. I encourage you to go see it. Another project I want to show you is something that came out of the hackathon. This is called CPM 703, and CPM stands for counts per minute, and 703 is the 703 million years, which is the half-life of uranium-235. And if you can't tell the geography here, this is a recording. These are Geiger counter recordings in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster. And what this filmmaker wants to do, he's actually a photographer, and he thought, what I want to do is I want to take that data that's coming from these crowdsourced Geiger counters, and I want to tell the stories of what's happening in Fukushima at those positions. So I can just show you, I'm not going to show you the actual prototype that they made. I'm going to show you some slides just for the purpose of this demonstration, but you can go online and see what they made. So here we see essentially of the Geiger counter readings, that's the red and the yellow, and then you can actually zoom in on some of those points, and this filmmaker has actually followed some of the stories of the people who've migrated away from that region, who are kind of constantly in fear of this nuclear radiation. So you can see that there's flags, these little hot spots where you can actually click on things and do more, and sort of mimicking it here. But then you can actually dive in and follow a story along a path, following those Geiger counter readings. So again, this kind of project is only possible because of essentially because of sensors. So to think about what's possible with everything from the range of implicitly shared information up until crowdsourced information and everything in between, there's potentially a lot of rich information for you to make interesting nonfiction work. Let's go back here. Another thing, just thinking about the near future, is Google Glass. And if you guys know Google Glass, this is potentially sort of a frightening privacy violation, but essentially you now have this sensor that's on, a sort of like magical thing that I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes. Here it is in a real form. You'll probably have these at some point in 2014, and this is scary, but there's also a lot of potential for filmmaking. If you think about it, this is, again, a sensor that's always on. What could you do if there was a natural disaster? I'm sure there could be a very easy way to make a documentary about it. Also, when you think about journalism, a lot of things that really interest people in journalism are about these shared experiences. And how cool would it be if there was some massive shared experience to be able to record it in some way and create some nonfiction project? I'm using the word documentary sometimes, but you can imagine that it could take any sort of form. When you have that data, it just becomes kind of absurd what you can do with it. Another thing that a lot of people have been making recently are platforms, and I'm really skeptical about platforms in general. And when I talk about platforms, I don't mean like mobile phone versus desktop versus TV. I'm actually talking about a piece of code, software that you log into and you drag and drop pieces of video to create an interactive piece of work. And there are a number of these things, and again, if you're really interested, if you're trying to find an easy way, if you're just trying to get a sense of what it's like to make interactive video, there is no shortage of potential tools. And all of these tools, I'm going to leave this up for people who are taking pictures of it, but all of these tools will essentially tell you the same thing. And this phrase is repeated on pretty much every one of these websites. And this is what it says. It's easy to create interactive stories without programming knowledge. And that's great. But the question is whether that serves your story. And for the most part, I think the answer is no. But again, if you're really, really new to something and you're just trying to play around, or if you have something that's essentially just a very linear documentary with a few branches, then maybe this is the way to go. I do want to show you one example of how this works, just so that you have a sense of what this tool is. And there's, not to call this out, I mean, Clint is one tool, there's many tools. Clint is one that is made by, it's actually an offshoot of a French company that makes interactive documentaries, and they created this tool for people to create their own documentaries. They had been locked into Flash until a couple of weeks ago, but they've released a new version of this product, which is HTML5, which is interesting for a lot of reasons, because you can see it on your mobile phones, etc. Actually, most of the platforms that are shared already don't work on mobile, which is definitely not a selling point. But I want to show you just a 1-minute video of how this software works. think of it, everybody says it's easy, but again, you know, what are you getting for nothing? Essentially, it's free, but what are you getting for it? You know, are you really getting that awesome creative thing that you thought you were making? Probably not. And most people, if I can skip ahead again, you know, most people say, I hear this again and again, that they tried to use one of these things. They tried to use a standard library. They tried to use this interactive thing, and it just didn't work, and they had such high hopes for it. They tried it, it didn't work, and they moved on to their own thing. And it's essentially what the pros do. You know, they don't use this off-the-shelf software because it rarely works for them. So it becomes a question of whether you should learn to code. That's a question that comes up, and it's a tough answer. I mean, you kind of shouldn't have to ask that question in a way, and the answer is you should already know how to code. But go ahead and do it. But it's a tough thing. It's a difficult profession, just like any difficult profession. But there are tools to help you. So you know, you may have heard these words if you have any sort of connection to the development world: HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. These are the three core technologies that make up a web app today. And essentially, you can make a web documentary using these three things. Now, writing that code from scratch is difficult, but luckily there are a lot of libraries to help you, and jQuery is one of the juggernauts of this world that pretty much anybody who's developing is probably building off of jQuery to make their thing. And I'm going to show you two examples coming up of people who were kind of this story. They thought they could do it with this off-the-shelf code, but in the end they end up doing their own thing. So I'm going to show you one project that came out of our first hackathon, and I'm actually going to do this live if this works. This is a project about combining video and data. So what you're going to see looks like video, but it's actually being generated for the most part in code. And this is one of the powerful, amazing things about HTML5 that you can do.
Right now, in the US economy, the monthly jobs report is far and away the most important economic indicator.
I would say it's a single best indicator of how the economy is doing.
Because they reflect people's felt experience.
It comes out on the first Friday of the month at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And
everyone gets up early. We're all on Twitter, swapping views on what we think is going to happen.
Everybody is waiting for these numbers that come out of that report. One is the number of jobs that the U.S. economy lost or gained in the previous month. And the other is the unemployment rate.
It's kind of a circus.
The month-to-month excitement is irrational.
One quick complaint.
So I'm just going to turn this down and start talking over it. So, you know, the letters that you're seeing, the numbers that you're seeing, they're actually being pulled from feeds. They're being pulled live. They're not being pulled live right now, but that's for the prototype. But they're essentially, these numbers are being pulled into the story. The graphs are being made in real time. All the lettering, there are animated GIFs that are being pulled in. So it looks like video, but it's essentially constructed in code. And I was just thinking if I have to interact with something, then it'll go without me. And it's this idea that data can create adaptable documentaries. I sort of joke with the filmmakers that, you know, they could license this film, but then they put themselves out of work, you know, because the film is always updating. If you think about it in a journalism context, this is an explainer that is always working, because if the job numbers are up or down, you can always play the same documentary and it'll adapt itself to what the numbers are. I think I may have skipped over a graph, but you can also stop, pause, play around with the data, and then continue on. So I think it's a really interesting paradigm of thinking about how video and data can be connected. But again, the reason why it's in this section is these guys thought they could make it with some off-the-shelf things, and in the end, they just said, you know what, we're doing something that's actually interesting, and we have to write this code ourselves. So that's what they like. So we'll move on from this project. Actually, there's probably a good place here. Oh yeah, here. So okay, so I'm just like stopping here to play around. So I just fast forward to a graph. So here's an example of just things that you can play around with. So, you know, these are all real numbers. And can I click to learn more? Oh, I did click to learn more. Okay, so you get the idea that it is interactive. It's a video. It feels like video. It plays like video. But you can stop it and play around with it, and it's done like code. So another project I want to show you, and this is probably arguably maybe the second most interesting nonfiction project of last year, again arguably, This came out a couple of months ago, and it's by the New York Times, and it's actually a sports story about an avalanche. But it was told in a way, and with a lot of the sort of like flashy gimmicks of JavaScript and CSS, that people were just totally absorbed by the storytelling, where you scroll a page, actually we'll do this together, you'll scroll through a page, and you'll just be sort of amazed, and you feel like you're just like flowing through a story. So it's kind of interesting, it's called Snowfall. A lot of people now say like, I want snowfall in my documentary. It's like become a thing, even that quickly. And I'm guessing many of you have seen this project before, right? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay, so many of you have seen this. So I'm just gonna scroll down the page, and you're just gonna see the effect, and it's essentially all I want to show you at this point. But you're seeing a video here already. You're seeing a video pop up here, which you can play, but you don't have to. And as you're scrolling again, now it's giving you sort of a geographical overview. This is still kind of the intro of the story. And you can watch that play out, but we're just skipping it. So if you haven't seen this, it's probably pretty cool. Like, you think this is pretty cool, right? I mean, the story is amazing to go along with it, but it just created this really interesting paradigm of how you can combine a lot of sort of the effects that are out there in the world right now to create a cohesive story that, you know, people love this story. But again, you know, these filmmakers, I'm sorry, call them filmmakers. This is a team of, you know, developers, designers, a videographer, a reporter. A lot of this was built off of jQuery and also, you know, custom built things. It's not something that they could make with any of these interactive tools. This is something they had to, you know, make themselves. They made some custom plugins, again, to make it work. But I was surprised when I first heard about it to think, oh, the New York Times must have invented some new thing. But really, it was just based on jQuery, which I thought was really interesting. Not completely, but a lot of it. So just moving on from this. So the fourth sort of opportunity that I see is simplicity. You know, people usually come to me and say, I've got this ambitious, amazing, crazy project, and it's got all these things and this and this and this. And it's just way, way, way too much. It's always too much. And it's a real differentiator for sort of professional web documentary maker versus an amateur documentary maker, that the professional knows what's not supposed to be in there. They understand the idea of interaction and interaction design, that the feeling of something is really important, that people understand, and that people, when they come to something, they immediately understand, they immediately have expectations, and you can fulfill those expectations. So there are a couple things that I'm going to show you. It's also just, if you saw this Onion story, which people loved in this documentary world, or the web documentary world, is everybody obviously talks about, you know, more interactive, and we need to have more things, and leave comments, and have questions, and share your story, but it's not always appropriate. And I actually don't think this is not really humor to me. This is like actually nonfiction when I read this, because I took this to heart and think about people don't really necessarily need interactivity. They just need the right thing for the project. If you saw Prometheus, it's just about the whole movie. You know, that I don't know what he's doing at this keyboard. Just totally makes no sense to me. And this is what I feel like a lot of times when I see web projects or fiction projects that I don't understand. Does anybody know what happened in this movie? Okay. But then I look at this thing and I'm like, I just don't even understand. Anyways, don't understand. So I come to this and I'm like, okay, I understand this. You just type in something and then something pops up your search results. Okay, I get it, it's a search engine. You know, it's much easier. Or you come to YouTube, just a play button. You know, a documentary that has a play button, I love that. You know, you just know that you can just sit back, press that button, and you can interact if you want to, but you don't have to. I value that. You know, and this is the kind of thing that, again, like a professional will know how to do. They'll know how to simplify something. They'll know how to set up an expectation that you can actually deliver on. So I'm going to show you a couple projects. Empire came out of our most recent hackathon, and it won the Participants' Choice Prize, meaning all the people who were there thought that this was the best project. And I think the reason why, I didn't think it would win, actually, this prize, but the reason why I kind of figured that it won in the end was because of its simplicity. It has a very easy to understand interface, and what it does is kind of ingenious. So I'll show this to you live. So actually, I'm going to read this here. This project presents two separate films united by a single soundtrack. As the seconds tick on, you choose which story you will watch and which you will ignore. Like your choices will be known.
Het klinkt heel raar, maar wat we eigenlijk overleden is eigenlijk vracht. En bij de meeste maatschappijen betaal je dat per kilo. We zijn wel heel druk bezig om daarvan af te komen, omdat het klinkt best wel gênant om te vragen hoe zwaar was je vader, want je betaalt per kilo.
So you get the paradigm here. You're essentially just going back and forth. This is actually this started out as an art installation. It was a three-dimensional space, and you had two projections on opposite sides, so you could never see any one film. So they were thinking, how can we bring this art installation idea onto the web? And of course, they have many other ideas. This is just the one that they developed for the purpose of our lab. But again, it's just a very simple interface. As you start playing around with it, you start seeing, oh, there's something that I want to see, oh, I can't see that. There's something I hear, I can't hear that. So it's totally absorbing if you go in. And of course, when they made this, they never thought this was going to be for the web. They made this for a three-dimensional space. And now that they've seen that, they're thinking about, well, as a filmmaker, what can I do to play around with this paradigm a little bit more than we did in the 3D space? So I'm just really interested in where this goes. But again, this is a very simple paradigm. You have this one bar that goes left and right. People get it right away. And if this is part of a series, which I think it's going to be, if there's 10 of these projects, you're going to kind of get what each 10 of these art installations translated to the web is going to be. So that's one idea, very simple. I'm going to pause this, or just go and keep playing actually. So just to continue on, there's another project which has gotten some note in the last year as well, called Alma, which is made or produced by Arte, which is a French-German broadcaster. And the producer of this piece is really known very well in Europe for making really some of the highest quality web documentaries. I'm going to show you a video of Alma. You're going to see again that the paradigm for this is very, very simple. This is essentially a video track of a woman, a talking head, and then a second screen where you can do something interesting. Actually, I should stop and see the video first.
Tenía 15 años cuando quería integrarme a una pandilla. Ellos mismos me ayudaron a levantarme. Yo me sentía muy destrozada por los golpes y todo lo que mis sentimientos. La policía eran unos desgraciados porque yo como mujer era como que ya teniéndome me podían tocar, me podían manosear, podían hacer muchas cosas conmigo. Pero claro, yo no me dejaba. Yo les gritaba, les decía que no me tocaran, pero muchas veces que me capturaron lo hicieron. Las violaciones, esto ella se volvió particular en nuestro barrio porque ellos miraban una mujer bonita, pero esa mujer bonita no se les acercaba pues porque les tenía mucho temor. Entonces ellos decían que la querían para ellos, pero no solo uno, sí.
right. So again, you see the basic idea here that it's a very simple interface. It could have been a total failure, you know, a talking head, you know, boring, and then some other sort of animation thrown on the top of that. But because the interaction is kind of really easy to understand, it's clearly a second screen. You've got this really simple just flick of the finger to get that second screen. It's a really, really nice interaction. You get it right away. It's a really pleasing experience. And again, you can view this online. So you've got the links for it. Another project, I think I'm just going to show you, I'm going to show you a video of this one. Again, this is from the same producer. Again, a very, very simple interface. I'll show you just 20 seconds of this. So again, that's a really simple interface. And if you saw in that first slide for this, I said that simplicity, aka UX, user experience, aka high concept. You see how when somebody can just tell you something very clearly, this is what it is. These are two cities separated by 3 kilometers, and you're going to be able to go back and forth between those two. You get a video every day. When you hear that sort of simplicity, you're like, oh, I get that, and it's really appreciated. Whereas again, if your idea is like, it's going to be this and this and this and this, you're like, whoa, I have no idea how that's going to work. I don't know how to interact with that. It's going to just be a real turn-off for somebody coming to it. So these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. So I want to stop there talking about these projects, but I want to talk a little bit more about just this idea of hacking and what we're promoting with the hackathon. So I don't know if there's any questions about some of these things that you've seen, but I just want to kind of breeze through just like 5 points of things to think about if you want to bring this sort of hack ethos into your life, as it were. So, so the hack ethos, yeah. So one of the things that's really critical for what we're doing with this lab is that we're really encouraging that people make something. And actually it's a requirement, you have to make something. And the reason why you have to make something is, there's many reasons. I mean, you want to make something because, first and foremost, documentaries are, you know, for the most part, they're not money-making endeavors. So it's about showing somebody who might give you money, this is what this thing is going to look like and what it's going to do, which is a little bit different than in sort of a commercial world where you can hide a product, and even though you shouldn't, but you can do that, and then, you know, release something into the public, and then you know, make money off of it. That's sort of not how it works in the doc world. In the doc world, you sort of get the funding up front to make something. So there's that. Showing something generates interest in something. This is something that's been proven again with like a Kickstarter campaign. You know, when you show something, it allows you to build off of that. And in a way, execution, this is something that comes from the business world, you know, execution is the only thing that matters. You might have an idea, but unless you've done something with that idea, it doesn't exist. An idea is a dime a dozen. So, you know, making something is really critical to, it's the number one thing when we're thinking about hacking. And again, this is not just for nonfiction projects. I think about this just in my life. You know, it's always better to just do something than to not do something. And that's, you know, that's what I'm sort of translating into the hackathon world. I stuck this in, you know, closer to the beginning of the slide when we were talking about advertising, entrepreneurship, and software engineering. The idea of the minimum viable product, there's sort of a beginner and advanced version of what this means. The basic idea is you don't need to do everything. You just need to do the smallest thing that shows off the idea. So when people come into a hackathon, they're not thinking I'm going to finish my project in 32 hours. They're thinking, what's something that I can realistically do that's going to show off to the world how awesome my whatever is, my X or Y or Z is. And that means you're going to focus on the thing that's going to make an impression, as opposed to you know, throwing the kitchen sink into something so that it's completed and, you know, you feel good about yourself. It's really not helpful to finish something when you're not really sure where it's going. It also, when you think about the minimum viable product, if it's worth doing, you should do it first. So, you know, why would you do that bells and whistles thing at the beginning when you don't have your core functionality or your sort of core product done? So it just brings all these things into focus. If you just make the minimum viable thing that you know, that's something you can build off of. And again, you do this over and over again. You do a minimum viable product in a weekend, and you do it next weekend, and you do it a month later, and you do it a week later, and suddenly you've learned so much, and you've made a product that's even better than you could have if you hadn't, or if you just made a list of requirements at the beginning, just, you know, without thinking, just executed on that list of requirements. So that's a minimum viable product. So vision as well. You know, the hackathon process or the hacking process is not about groupthink. It's not about having meetings. It's not about, what do you think of this idea? It's about one person coming in, usually the filmmaker, the quote-unquote filmmaker, saying, I have an idea for a project, who's into this idea? And developers and designers, and you know, it might be like a social media person or some other sort of associate producer might be attached to that idea. But it's not something where people come into the hackathon and think about, well, what do you want to do? Let's talk about it, let's think about it. Let's bat some ideas around it. And sure, that happens on a small scale, but for the most part, it's one person coming in with a big vision of what this idea is going to be, and they're the one that's driving it. And I think of it like, it's sort of like the auteur theory of web documentary making, you know, that there's actually a real author to it. It's not that a corporation is making something, it's that there's a real sort of human being behind something. Another thing about the vision is when there's one person behind it, nobody's preventing that person from making that thing. So these are just ideas that I hope you can bring in, you know, to your work on a daily basis, but it comes into focus, you know, when you have 32 hours to make something. I sort of referenced this before that, you know, you might come in with requirements, but you really have to dump those requirements. You've got to come into something knowing that you don't really know because it hasn't been tested, which is why you're still making it. You don't really know how a thing's going to work. You don't know how an audience is going to respond to it, which means don't execute blindly. Start with your minimum viable product and be flexible. Something might change. You might realize that that interaction idea that you thought was going to be great was terrible, and you can pull back from it and do something else that does work. And you have enough time in 32 hours to do that. And then finally, it's this idea of sharing it. As I said, all of the prototypes for these projects are online. And the idea for sharing is that doing something in public is good. It forces you to engage with the thing that you're making. And if you just think about sort of statistically, you're going to be more engaged with the thing you're doing than something you're not doing. So the idea is to force yourself to put it out there. It really, really makes it real. If, for those of you who are filmmakers, you know, when you see a film with an audience, it's a very different experience than when you saw the final thing edited, you know, on Final Cut. Very, very different experience. So sharing it does that. Also, people can learn from it. And part of the reason that we're doing these things is that people can build off of it. And other developers that are hacking might build off of it as well. You might be contributing to an open source project or just giving people inspiration. So these are things that we think about. But no matter what, you want to remember that it really comes down to the story that, you know, I like technology, I think it's interesting, I think technology can do a lot of things, but in the end, technology is just technology, and it's got to be the story that's dictating everything. So I'm going to stop there, but before I do, just let you know that we're hiring, so if you're a developer or interested, come talk to me. And at the same time, Hackathon, remember to talk to me afterwards if you're interested in participating. The next Hackathon is April 13th and 14th, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm going to stop there. And
cool, awesome.
Yeah.
We have some 5 minutes or so for questions, so if there are any questions, please feel free to just say them very loudly. I will not run around with the microphone looking like a dork. Please.
Yes, the examples you showed were really amazing. I was wondering, all the examples were experience-based and not user content contributions. And I was wondering if you had any ideas, recommendations for if you did want to incorporate user content, what platform or what experience have you seen that sort of works well?
I think this comes down to that Gossage quote, you know, about when you make something, and people say a lot, I'm going to create a community with my project, and that's wrong. I don't believe that. I don't think you can create a community. I think you can just tap into a latent community that already exists. So a lot of times these sort of crowdsourcing ideas, share your story ideas, add to my thing, they sound really desperate because they're not something that somebody would inherently want to do. So it's more of a question of coming back to your project and saying, is this something that you think is going to intersect with a group of people that is latently interested in something? So there's no specific answer, but it's an important first question to ask about who's going to contribute. I found, because I have done crowdsourcing projects, obviously, that the time when crowdsourcing projects work really well is when somebody has some inherent interest in their piece of data going out into the world. So, as an example, it might be that you are making a project at pbs.org, and they want their little piece of data to be seen on this very popular website. That's an incentive for someone. Another incentive might be if somebody is, I'm not going to give a specific topic, but let's say there's some topic and there's somebody who's sort of a semi-pro in that topic, maybe a blogger or somebody who's an author or somebody who has sort of a tangential interest in something. They have an interest in selling their wares. So they have an interest in contributing. So, and my experience is that these people who I've called semi-pros, they're the ones who are the most likely to contribute. But you've got to find what that Venn diagram is.
Do the hackathon projects that you pick tend to be standalone, or do you ever do sort of companion projects to more traditional films, or is this sort of a separate component?
It's a range. So some projects are natively what you saw. So for example, data docs, there's no documentary. I mean, that is the documentary. And actually, Mike worked on a project at the Helsinki season, and the film had locked picture right before they'd started. So in that case, there was a locked documentary, which is going to be premiering at Tribeca. So the project was sort of a companion to the film, where it added a different sort of thing. The film is one kind of thing, and the web thing is a different sort of thing. And then there's a range. So there's nothing to say that there can't be cross-media. There's a project that I didn't show you, which is they're making ebooks, ebook cookbooks with video in them, and they actually are interested in selling those books. So it's a combination of an iPad app where you can actually have the cookbook and an e-commerce website where people can organize their recipes and share them and sell them. So it's really everything.
I'm going to ask you a quick question. Would you say that if you're like an independent creator, that participating in a hackathon is a great way to kind of start to potentially fundraise for your project because you have something to show?
For sure. I mean, like I said before, one of the reasons for making something is that you have something to show and potentially make money off of. The projects that come in, they're judged based on the idea and the potential for a person to execute. You don't have to have a completed documentary. You don't even have to have started a documentary. All you have to do is come with an idea, essentially. And of course, I'm going to evaluate, do you actually have the goods behind that? Is there, in the material that you've provided along with your application, does it show that you have the potential to make something? And that can range. I mean, if you have made films before, I might guess you could make another film. Or if you've done journalism before, I could guess that your skills might translate into documentary. Or if you're a developer, I can see, a previous project is kind of like this, but I can see where you're going with it. So absolutely. I mean, some people come in who are vets of documentary making, and other people who are totally new, have never done anything like this before.
Cool. A couple more questions?
Are there any sites which do free hosting for interactive stories the way YouTube does for almost completely non-interactive and linear stories?
That's a good question. I think that a lot of the tools that are in that list essentially come with hosting sort of built in because they're hosted by that site. But it's an interesting question. I mean, the great thing about the websites is that they're super cheap to have, so it's not really going to be your biggest expense. You can have a website for $25 a year, So, but I can't tell you specifically which ones, but a number of them are going to be hosting your interactive video on their site.
I wondered, one of the first videos you showed us had kind of data feeds built into it. It's sort of evolved, I guess, over time with real-life data, the black and white one. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you see that sort of concept and that sort of technology evolving over time. Will it become a data visualization sort of thing where you can just automatically create videos from the data, or do you still have to have human elements? Is that clear?
I think you're trying to say, will we be able to automatically make documentaries out of data?
That's part of it, yeah. And then, I guess does this whole thing evolve over time?
Something that I learned from being a journalist is that data point usually needs a human face. So it's kind of, there's going to be exceptions to that. But for the most part, if you're telling a story with data, there's usually a kind of human story that you're telling along with it, which is why, when you talk about unemployment numbers, that there's people that are kind of explaining like there's a real person behind this number, it's not just a number. But not to say that there can't be something that's interesting that just comes out of just raw information. I think there could potentially be something there. I mean, Bear 71 is a construct in a way. There's a voiceover, that an actor and an actress is essentially giving this bear a voice. But would it have been interesting without that voice? I still think so. But was it awesome because there was a voice? Probably.
To continue with the data-driven example you showed, because you did say that it would play differently, presumably the following month when new set of numbers were released. But you did there was the kind of diagrammatic voiceover of someone commenting on those numbers. So was that automatically updated as well?
In the prototype, no. But you can imagine that it could be very easy to have multiple voices come in and say different things and have those recorded a year in the past. But what you're seeing there was essentially just static. It was those voices just pieced together, knowing that it could be adaptable. But what you're seeing is essentially based on a locked feed. It's not actually pulling live off the internet.
But the idea was to demonstrate that that was a possibility.
Yeah, the idea was to demonstrate a lot of things. But yeah, one of them being that this is essentially a video that's adaptable based on data. And all those pieces that you saw, it's tough to see, but many of those pieces were not actually video. They were just pieces of things that were sort of strung together and pieced together. So you can do that with videos. It's one of the powerful things about that project.
Sure. But I mean, I just was thinking of the length then would have to, because there was a voice going across the entire duration of the piece.
There were different voices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those, in a sense, I'm just thinking from the programming side, that's what dictated the length of the piece, was the number of pulls that explicated in theory.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then the illustration would fill in.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the way that, I haven't looked in that code enough, I'm pretty sure the way it works is that it constructs it at the start. So it's not like halfway through it then pulls the data. It's pulling everything from the start to construct the video. So it's going to know the length of time beforehand.
Great, so one more question.
Earlier in the talk, you talked about 3 points, one of them being an entrepreneurial aspect to what one creates. And with the publishing industry and journalism in such huge flux, what is your advice and or your experience about how, or some examples of monetizing it? I mean, you just mentioned an ebook with video and cookbook and stuff like that. And since cookbooks are one of the things that you can actually make money off, if you're successful. I'm just curious to hear your perspective about monetizing.
Yeah, I'm very interested in projects that say, I think I have an idea that can help a documentary maker actually make money. I'm very interested to hear those. It's a really difficult thing because it's not the model. Documentaries, if you think about, I haven't done this calculation, I have to do this now, but documentaries are really, really cheap to make because per hour, the documentary filmmaker is not paying themselves very much. So it's a real problem that, I shouldn't say it's a problem yet, because there are, you get funding, you get grants for things, but there's no really easy path to make money as a documentary filmmaker. So I don't have an answer, but I'm very interested in exploring. That's part of the reason why, if you have an idea, you should talk to me, that we're interested in projects like this, because the cookbook idea wasn't from the start an e-commerce idea. Just the thought was, wait a second, you could sell this. Let's think about what that means. How could you reconstruct your idea to make money off of it? And as you know, I mean, a cookbook can make money. So there was just a really interesting idea there. Is that ebook idea going to carry through for every documentary? I don't think so. But to find that thing that people will pay for is definitely something to look for down the line. So I don't have a great answer for you. But I do know that you saw that in my list there were some journalistic interactive story making tools, and there are more. Like Book, for example, is one, and Atavist was in the list for long-form journalism, and Ebooks Author, which is like an Apple product that lets people make things. They allow you to incorporate video and other sorts of things. But if you look at transmedia in the sense of writing, they're still not there yet. The publishing world doesn't really get transmedia yet. I read an article a couple months ago, and the headline was, "In publishing, transmedia is a mess." And essentially that was the thesis of the piece, and it seemed to be pretty true.
Well, thanks again, Adnaan, for coming in, and really appreciate the presentation. We live stream all of our forums, and this will be archived in a couple of days up on our YouTube channel. So thanks again. So we have 2 5x5s, and so Julian, if you want to go ahead and load your 5x5, that'd be great. And then if you're not ready by the time, because it might take the time, then I'll introduce Kareem. So 5x5s are basically opportunities for creators in the StoryCode community to present projects that they're working on, to basically tell folks in the community what they're doing, and to potentially elicit collaborators or various types of help or folks to work with. So this is a really good opportunity for independent creators in the community to talk about their own projects. So we have 2 on deck today, and we also have Karine Halpern. Karine has come from France. You may recognize her as KH Enthusiasm on Twitter and Transmedia Ready. And so I think while Julian is setting up his, I'll turn it over to you and you can talk about the Transmedia Alliance and the 7 Families cards. Okay? Please, yes. Front and center.
I used to watch the stream. When did you start the meetup?
About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
It's been 2 years I'm watching this meetup happening from Paris. I've been here once, I think. So it's the first time I take the microphone, so I'm very impressed. And I wanted to talk to you about 2 things. First, Mike and I, we actually were happy to be at South by Southwest, and there are people here in the room that we met at South by Southwest about a week ago, I think. And it was the first time that in the South by Southwest Interactive Festival, we had the Transmedia meetup. There were Transmedia meetups before, but it was half the festivals. People were gathering together, and it was a very nice community starting. And we Transmedia New York City, StoryCode, and other groups in different countries, we'd end up to create an international, more global community. And recently we have started to work on the creation of a non-profit organization called Transmedia Alliance that is more than just Europe, more than just North America or South America. We have also people in Hong Kong who started a very nice transmedia group and transmedia studio in Hong Kong recently. So it's growing, and I want to tell you that soon everything is going to be online under transmediaalliance.org. It's already there. We have a Twitter account, Transmedia with 2A at the end, Transmedia Alliance. And it's the beginning of a real international and global non-profit. So this is the year that we're starting. So everybody, of course, is welcome with ideas. We're looking for volunteers. We already have a great group of volunteers, and everybody is from a different country, therefore culture, and we look at the issues regarding the languages. And it's important, especially for web documentaries. We're starting to see platforms where you have several languages, so it's very important. And the other thing I'm working on since 2 to 3 years, I started another nonprofit called Transmedia Ready, and I created a card game. It's a prototype. It's called the 7 Transmedia Families, and I use it to teach and train. And I am really happy that now I teach in universities about transmedia. And here I have the very last real life transmedia families card game. I did 500 prototypes. They went all over the world to researchers and practitioners to exchange ideas about transmedia. And now I'm looking for partners, collaborators, gamers, sponsors, co-publishers to go to the next version, because I have great feedback. And we need to do the next one, which is going to be even better one. And of course, we want to do the ebook and the app using what has been going on with this game for 2 years. So for this, you can also find me under transmediaready.com. I'm based in Paris, and I have people who work with me in different countries. So happy here to answer some questions about either transmediaalliance.org or transmediaready.com. Thank you. Please, I want to say something special for Mike and Aina, who is in Montreal tonight. I want to congratulate them for doing the Transmedia meetup in New York and StoryCode and the hackathon, and continue to grow this community, because we're learning from each other and has been helping other people in other countries to actually do the same thing. So thank you very much, Mike and Aina.
Thanks, Corinne. So Corinne will be hanging out afterwards. If you'd like to talk to her, please feel free to do so. And our next 5x5 is Julian Cheevers, who will be presenting a pretty interesting project. Looking forward to hearing about it.
Hey everyone, so I'll try and follow up from the last presentation, tough shoes to fill, hopefully a bit of fun here. My name is Julian Cheevers, I work at White & Kennedy Ad Agency. So this project is the heist experience. So as a topic, potentially polarizing and not for everyone, but I think as a hook to a story, I think people are fascinated with it because we're excited about how audacious it is, and we're excited about what it must feel like to put everything online and the thrill of that. So this experience is about bringing to life the mental and physical thrill of it. But obviously, ultimately, it's just entertainment. You're not going to jail, you're not winning or taking $100 million either. So I'm mixing it with entertainment here. And so the idea is that it's kind of a challenge, and there's a leaderboard, and the team that pulls off the biggest heist through this experience, say over a month's run, gets a film made of their attempts. So all the security camera footage captured from each experience would be dropped into a broader story arc about a mini film, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit more. But I think that's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the film, I think, allows people to play into the romance, the indulgence of heists, but I think it also allows people to give themselves to play in a role and give themselves to the experience. So your heist attempt, I'm going to focus primarily on the experience itself. So you start off at a New York place, you get taken into the back, you're shown a film, and you're introduced to Mr. Big, who tells you all about the challenge of taking on the heists. So the video will play out a short film of security guards patrolling the area and give you a sense of what it is to take it off. Then you go to a van, you're taken to the heist place, and in the van you're given balaclava and gloves and a stopwatch. So you go to the venue, the secret location, and once you're there, you need to try and pull off this heist. If it goes wrong, pandemonium, the alarms go off, you're surrounded and arrested. But obviously, there's 100 vaults there or security boxes. You don't know which one the diamonds are in, so it's a bit of a challenge there. Then, after that, you go to a bar, secret bar, PDT, so all these would be partnerships. You go to the back room, you see Mr. Big, who you saw in the film. He takes your winnings, if you like, and he tells you he's going to wash all the money. Excuse me. So the heist film here. So there's a leaderboard, so the largest crew gets featured in the short film, and footage your attempt is dropped into a broader story arc. And so there's a midnight viewing party, say at the end of each month, that all the participants are invited back to, but you don't know whether you've won or you feature in the film until you view the film at the end of each month, and then locations change for a new run. So it's basically this experience that's brought to life. There's film elements, and there's a chance to feature in your own film or feature in a film about your attempt if you pull off the biggest heist. So that's the general idea at the moment. Again, very much prototype stage at this stage. Looking to work with people who might be able to help me scope it out, but also looking to just learn from the community and build the idea. So that's it.
Cool. So people can talk to you after the...
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like fun. Cool, thanks a lot, Julian. So just a couple of announcements. our monthly immersive media dispatch. If you have member news, if you're launching a project and you want us to feature it, just send it to myself or Ina. We're happy to include it in the newsletter. For those of you who don't know, DIY Days was announced. It's going to be April 27th at the New School. Free tickets. It's an awesome one-day event that is highly recommended. A lot of kind of cross-platform innovators will be there. Lots of workshops, lots of design thinking. A really interesting day that's highly recommended. So again, that's April 27th. Tomorrow at 12:15, there'll be a Future of Storytelling Google Hangout with Andrea Phillips. Many of you know Andrea. She wrote the book, The Creator's Guide to Transmedia. She'll be in a publicly accessible hangout tomorrow starting at 12:15. We tweeted those URLs earlier today. Last but not least, next April 23rd will be our next StoryCode forum with James Carter, the second presenter of the run. So really excited to hear about James. Talking about his project New York Hearts. It'll be kind of there'll be a new version of New York Hearts being released shortly thereafter, but I'm sure he'll also talk about what he learned from the first go around. So it's just really interesting to see how projects in our community are evolving and what we're learning from them. So we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be April 23rd. We'll announce it on the website as always. So thanks for coming. Thanks to Adnaan. Thanks to Kareen. And thanks to Julian. Take care.